Greetings, Commanders. With the upcoming release of the Nanite Torpedoes anti-Titan weapons, the need to develop the ultimate delivery platform for those torpedoes came about. At the Xeno Strike Force, we've been experimenting with a series of attempts at creating that build and looking at what could work best. We started initially by seeing if we could modify the tried and tested Titan kill crate build to suit that purpose, which kind of worked okay. But as it so happens, given the nature of bomber type of ship builds that require you to be close to a Titan and consequently are highly exposed to far-going missiles that abound in that environment, the opportunity to create a shielded build was of interest. And the crate just doesn't happen to operate as ideally as a shielded build as some other ships do. Our attention fast turned to the Fer-de-Lance and the Mamba as to ships which could perform that role. Ultimately, the Mamba won over due to its ability to kit two large torpedo pylons while retaining the otherwise excellent heat characteristics and speed that are inherent to the ship itself. The TitanBomber Mamba was thus born, and the act of developing it into a wing stealth bomber came about, which was quite the effort, and I want to say unlike pretty much any wing build that we've created to date. We'll get why and how that operates in a moment. In order to understand what is unique about this build, it's sufficient to look at its hardport configuration. You have one huge fixed beam laser with long range and thermal vent experimental, which is extremely effective at keeping you cool, and it's also extremely effective at stripping shields of Orthruses, Medusas, Hydras, or other hardened targets when needed to support fighter wings in Titan space. We'll expect, even though these have not released yet, so we don't really know their hardport configuration, but if they're anything like current torpedoes, which come with small, medium, and large hardpoints, we'd expect to see the ability to kit two large Nanite torpedoes on the ship, torpedo pylons. And then here's the truly unique setup of the ship. We have one small turreted pulse laser with long range and concordance sequence, and one small turreted beam laser with long range and regeneration sequence. Concordance sequence and regeneration sequence are two very uncommon experimentals that people just don't use that often because they only work in a wing. The regeneration beams, when targeting a friendly commander in a wing, regenerate their shields, albeit on a relatively small rate. The concordance sequence effect instead boosts their shield regeneration effect by a factor of 10, which is an incredibly powerful effect, which makes it akin to being almost docked in terms of how quickly one's shields regenerate. Where's the catch, and why do these work so well together? The catch is concordance sequence only works when shields are regenerating. So if you're actively under fire, your shield generation is interrupted. Your shields only start regenerating 3 seconds after you've stopped taking damage. So if you're continuously taking damage, concordance sequence will not help. It will not do anything because it only applies when your shields are regenerating. However, the effect of concordant is extremely powerful. On the flip side, regeneration sequence is not all that powerful, but unlike concordant sequence, it stacks. So concordant sequence is an on or off effect that's very powerful, only works when your shields are charging, and doesn't stack. Regeneration sequence is a much less powerful effect. However, it does stack, so you can have 3 wing members actually use that effect on your shields while you're taking damage, and that works even when taking damage. Combined, those two effects we've proven in our latest dives with Xeno Strike Force are incredibly powerful and incredibly effective. These make for an extremely uncommon wing bomber that kind of takes the level of reliance on your wing members pretty much to the next level, as you have to stay within 6 kilometers of each other, and you have to really operate as a team to make the most out of these effects. When it comes to core internals, we went lightweight, heavy-duty deep plating on armor, as these ships need to be fast. They doubly so need to be fast because of a drives element that we'll get to in a moment. You could go military grade if you wanted here, but there's a sacrifice in speed if you do so, which we do not recommend. The power plant is one of the unique setups of a ship in that it is a low emissions and thermal spread power plant, which is the most heat efficient power plant you can get. And that will be extremely important when we explain in a moment. The drives is also an uncommon setup, as these, instead of using the almost ubiquitous dirty drives with drag drives, this ship uses clean tuning and thermal spread. The reason we use clean drives with thermal spread is because we need the thermal headroom to allow us to stay under 20% heat while our shields are recharging. Shields recharging turn out to actually generate quite a bit of heat, and if you don't have clean drives and you are under thrust, while your shields are charging, you will break that 20% heat threshold, which means you're detected, which means everything in the Titan instance fires at you and you're going to have a bad day. With clean tuning and thermal spread drives, you are able to stay under that threshold even when your shields are charging, which makes for a unique stealth bomber shielded configuration, which would otherwise not be possible to sustain in Titan space without actually taking a disproportionate amount of fire and aggro. The power distributor is probably the most standard build with a charge enhanced with super conduits. Nothing special to say about that one. Same with sensors. It was a 4D long range. You could get a bit more speed with using light wave sensors, but you really want to be able to see what's going on around you in the Titan. So using long range is highly advisable. Live support is 4D light wave. Nothing surprising there. Frameshift drive is a 4A with increased range of mass manager, but you can use really anything that gets you around. And a fuel tank is a standard one. When it comes to optional internals, again, we get somewhat of an unconventional configuration here. We use a Class 5A shield generator. It uses the enhanced low power and low draw experimentals. Again, this is extremely uncommon for a number of reasons. We tried making this work with biweaves, which was the most ideal shield setup, honestly, to use with concordant sequence because concordant sequence multiplies the recharge rate. Biweaves have more than double the recharge rate of regular Class A shields, so the concordant sequence effect would have been much more powerful in biweaves. However, biweaves run too hot. There was no way we could make biweaves work on this build while staying within a heat thermal envelope that we had designated for these to be qualified as stealth bombers. As a result, we had to drop biweaves and look for something else. We tried prismatics, but prismatics were too power grid hungry. It really didn't allow this build to operate with the thermal spread and low emissions power plant. And so the sweet spot we found, which is actually nice because it doesn't rely on the power play gated prismatics, is to use a standard Class 5A shield generator engineered for enhanced low power and using furthermore the low draw experimental. The low draw experimental is also particularly nice because it allows to fly the ship with pips set to 141 or to 114. And with just one pips in sys, considering the low draw really drops the system distributor requirement very low, it will allow you to charge your shields entirely while using just one pips in sys, which is very, very handy in practice. Beyond the shield, which is a key element of this build, we have a 2A AFMU, unengineered, because the only engineering available will be shielded and kind of useless for this build. If you get to a point where shielded matters on this AFMU, your ship is completely wrecked to begin with, so it's kind of beyond the point, which is really just there as insurance. If all goes well, you will never use your FMU. However, if all does not go well, you'll be thankful that you have one on board. The FMU also turns automatically off in deploying hard points based on how power priorities work for this build. So it doesn't really contribute to heat at all because it's off. Storing hard points allows you to bring your FMU online and allows you to repair if need be while you're in a Titan safe spot or you're hiding in the asteroid field. We have 2 hull reinforcement packages, all engineered for heavy duty and deep plating for the situation where your shields do drop, and also to tank the phasing damage that a lot of things in Titan space do. Glaives do phasing damage, interceptor cannon fire does phasing damage. Caustic mines do phasing damage. We just learned this this last week. We had no idea that caustic mines actually damage you through shields. Now we know. And we learned the hard way. So having some degree of hull buffer is necessary, even though this is a build that relies primarily on its shields for protection. For the same reason, having module reinforcement packages is a significant insurance policy to operating, because if you do lose your shields, you become extremely vulnerable. If you have been targeted by Fargon missile strikes, those can absolutely wreak havoc on your modules. And having some kind of protection for your modules means your canopy doesn't blow and your ship remains at least in some degree of fighting shape, even while taking some degree of direct damage to hull. So pretty good insurance policy overall. Utilities. Utilities are somewhat dictated by the requirements of this build. You need a Fargoid Pulse Neutralizer, otherwise you're not going to bomb any Titan, because you're not even going to be able to get there. So that's kind of mandated. As a reminder, the Fargoid Pulse Neutralizer doubles as a shutdown field neutralizer once in Titan space. So make sure you bind that hotkey as being shut down in Titan space by the passing Orpheus or by an interceptor that's being fought by your fighter cover wing is no fun. You'll want presumably a pulse wave Xeno scanner, as the hypothesis is that you will need that device to be able to identify the vents and lock them with your Nanite Torpedoes. Well, we don't know that's specifically true. It might be something that you can replace just an enhanced Xeno scanner with, but considering these are bombers and considering that we will want to have a scan of a Titan and that it may be necessary, this is what we're currently using in anticipation of how we presume it will work. You'll need at least one caustic sink launcher, not only for traversing the caustic area and getting to a maelstrom without taking a disproportionate amount of damage, but also for the caustic missiles and inevitable caustic clouds that you'll find all around Titan space. Then the 6 utilities of a Mamba allow you to mount 2 0E class shield boosters, engineered with heavy duty and supercapacitors. E class shield boosters are the ones that have the most bang for your buck as far as power draw and thus heat is concerned. So it's not an accidental history or an error. We are actually suggesting to use E-class shield boosters on this build for that reason. And then finally, you have a personal choice. You can either mount a second caustic sink launcher, which would be my personal recommendation, what I personally use on this build. However, you can also choose to instead mount a third shield booster, which gives you another 20 to 25% shield integrity and consequently more shield buffer, which is actually quite nice. Or you can choose to mount a serious heatsink, which allows you to be less dependent on running cold naturally or using your huge fixed beam when you're needing to boost or when you're needing to fire your other weapons like the torpedoes. That's a personal choice. It's not really something that is required in any of those 3 configurations. As I mentioned, I find the convenience of a second caustic sink launcher to be nice, because while it's possible to synthesize caustic heat sinks while inside Titan space, it's relatively expensive from a materials choice standpoint. And the integrity of the shields as we tested them is already pretty good, so I don't feel like I need a third shield booster. I also don't like the idea of having a serious heatsink on this, because I feel I would use it as a crutch instead of learning to rely on the natural coldness of a ship, and instead of relying to use my huge beam to cool off when necessary. I feel like I'd be using serious heat sinks as a crutch, and you only have 5 of them before you need to synthesize them. And it's one more thing to worry about, like what your sink count is and whether you can synthesize without getting shot upon. So personally, I recommend the caustic sink, noting the other 2 options are perfectly legit and equally practical. So with that being said, on the Xeno Strike Force, if you're interested in learning more about how this hyper-specialized build operates, how it is designed, how it's meant to operate in a wing, how it's meant to interact with its fighter escorts, as again, this is a bomber. It is meant and designed to operate in a bomber wing of 4 people that are flying these kind of ships, but it is also meant to be actively supported by a fighter and space superiority wing of builds like the Titan Killer Mark II, Crate Mark II, as those would allow you to deal with glaives, deal with occasional interceptor that gets your tail, in other situations for which these ships just aren't equipped. All in all, what we're gearing up towards again is creating these ideal delivery mechanisms for Nanite Torpedoes, while operating in partnership between fighter wings and bomber wings in Titan space. Again, more information, if you're interested, is available on the Xeno Strike Force website on the page linked in the comments below. With that being said, hope you enjoy this build. Try it out, let us know how it works. Glory to mankind, and wing up and strike. And furthermore, last but not least, if you enjoy these videos, don't forget to like and subscribe, as it encourages us to make more and continue creating great content for this community. Fly safe, Commanders. Commander Mechan, over and out.